Good morning. We are so glad you've tuned in to join us this morning. I think I say that every single Monday morning, but we are. We're so glad that you've tuned in to join us this morning. I am Jenny.
And I'm Chrys, and we have to say that every Monday morning because that's true. All right, we have a scripture for today. It's Proverbs 25:13. I love this. Reliable friends who do what they say are like cool drinks in sweltering heat, refreshing. Love that. Love that as we're thinking about Valentine's Day, and, which isn't just about your honey. It's about showing love to everybody in your life. So great scripture. Parenting is a big, huge job that never ends. I say once a mom, always a mom. I still answer the phone when my kids call happily and ready to help them do whatever.
Absolutely.
Now, a few weeks ago, my granddaughter called, and I'm not even going to name names, and she had gone to school, with two different boots on. I mean, I don't even know how that happens, and they were so totally opposite. That is either not awake in the morning or not,
distracted.
I have no idea. Or dressed in the dark. I don't know.
But you said one zipped up and one didn't.
Oh, one didn't just zip up. It had zippers all on it. Like it was like the design was all zippery. And the other one was just plain. The funny thing, too, when I got there and handed her the correct boot and she handed me the incorrect boot, she looked at me and said, "Is this yours? I don't even know whose boot this is." I mean, she had on a boot she didn't even recognize.
Oh, that is hysterical.
Hilarious. So, if
that
you're
was in
a mom,
big hurry.
if you're a mom, you are always a mom and willing to help and do and whatever. And typically, I would have said, just make it to the end of the day. But that particular day, she had a big thing after school and a big thing that night. And so, I was like, okay, I'm coming with your other boot.
Just like
Craziness.
One of your grandsons.
Yes,
not long after that.
Not long after that. Forgot his basketball uniform, and basketball pictures were being taken. So
that day.
Okay,
it makes me feel so much better. It just does.
Life in the mom world.
That's it.
Definitely.
Life in the fast lane of being a mom.
It is.
But we are here for moms of all ages and in all stages, as you can tell.
Exactly right.
We are rocking this world of being a mom, a grandmom, whatever.
Well, last week, we talked about homework and kind of winning the homework wars, which in some homes they can be a war at night.
But we wanted to go back, remember? And because during the break we were talking about, we got on the air and just started talking and went with it. But during the break we were talking about how Valentine's Day was here, and you know how the media really does push the whole romance thing, and it makes some people, it's a really difficult time for a lot of people if you don't have a special someone or whatever.
Right.
But I'd just like to encourage you, if you don't have someone of a romantic nature to share Valentine's Day with, don't let this day pass you by without taking the opportunity to write just a little note and thank those that are in your world just for who they are to you. Just a little note of thanks, maybe with a little chocolate heart or whatever. Just
or
that
a Valentine.
Sweet note.
I mean, just a Valentine to somebody who's made a difference in your life.
Right.
And one thing that I was thinking along those lines is we just need to verbalize our thank yous and appreciations to other people in front of our kids.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think they don't see that enough. Just if we say things like, wasn't it nice of your grandmother to take those clothes out to you or your boot? I mean, I'm just using that for an example.
Right.
And then saying, she's really busy, but she did that because she loves you. And
bringing a level of appreciation.
Or saying, I really appreciate how much your teacher at church does for you guys. Don't you appreciate that? And I think, we are all so rushed in our busy, busy world today.
Absolutely.
That we don't verbalize to our kids and in front of our kids our thankfulness. And then what's going to happen is they aren't going to have that thankful spirit that we want them to have. And so a step further in that is having them sit down and send a Valentine to those special people, like their grandparents, to the teachers at church, and their teachers at school, and just,
it just develops a
neighbor.
different mindset in their little hearts before they get to the age of seeing all the inundation for just the romantic side of it.
That's exactly right.
It is a special opportunity. Yes. It just is.
But even aside from Valentine's Day, let's all be more diligent about being thankful.
Expressing our gratitude.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you, Chrys.
Well, thank you, Jenny. There we are. We're putting it into practice. I was a little shocked at first. Wasn't sure what she was doing, but now I've got it. We're thankful for each other.
It was just a moment that you were surprised.
I was surprised. All right, so we did talk about homework last week, and we gave you some ABC, so we're just going to review that.
Yes.
We said, A, let kids do their homework all by myself, is what it says, all by themselves. You know, when they're two, and as soon as they start talking, that's kind of a big deal. Myself, by myself.
By myself.
You know, all my kids did that, all my grandkids. But then they get older and they don't want to do things by themselves anymore. So we've got to get back to this. No, this is your homework. You're going to do this by yourself. And that means setting a place in your home where they can be by themselves. We're all tempted to put them at the counter in the kitchen while we're cooking, so we can be there to help them, so we don't have to walk across the hall to the other room where they are. But I'm telling you, if they're in the other room by themselves, they have more of a tendency to get it done more quickly.
Technology.
Without the distractions. They will get it done by themselves, and they will have less questions for you, because you also set this up. You say, I'm not coming to you when you have a question, you come find me.
That's right.
So they're more likely to work their way through something. And then, of course, you inspect what you expect. We say that about everything.
Everything.
It's fine to check their work.
And that's not micromanaging.
No, that's not.
Keeping them accountable.
Right. Like we say, this is coaching them through life.
That's exactly
right. The coach is not out on the court or on the playing field. The coach is on the sidelines, but he is checking with everything.
That's right.
That's not bad.
That's a good word. And then B is back off. Back off.
That's right.
Where we have to, like you were saying, let them do it on their own. Bring them to a place where they are doing it on their own.
And how that happens is us taking that step backwards.
That's it.
Saying, you know, you can do this. This is yours, and you can do it.
Last week, you said a great thing when you said, if it applied, thank you, to what you were just saying, you come find me. But before you come find me, go ahead to the next problem and finish all the ones you know, so that we can address it all at one time.
Right.
So it doesn't waste your time or my time.
That's what I do with my grandkids. I tell them, don't get stuck on one. Don't come find me with one, especially math. Just keep going. Then when you, at the end, then we'll solve them all. Because a lot of times in schoolwork, and when I used to teach kids, when I used to teach school, I told kids this: sometimes the answer will come to you as you keep working through the worksheet.
The process of elimination happens.
Well, and we're smart. God's given us a brain, and that brain handles things in a different way, and sometimes in a different time frame. And maybe you look at that and it just doesn't come to you, but if you keep going, your brain will click in for you, and you can go back and solve that one. So that's one of the reasons I tell them, don't come see me right off the bat. You just keep on going. And then C, we called it, call it quits. And that means set a time limit when your kids should be done with their homework, or when it's bedtime.
Right.
So you say your bedtime is 9 o'clock on a school night, and tell them 9 o'clock means everything is done. Don't come in at 9 o'clock and say, I forgot to do, because you will not have that opportunity. And again, that teaches kids time management and responsibility and consequences and all those great, great things.
And none of us really like to have our kids have to deal with consequences, but you know what? That's the best teacher.
That is the hardest thing for us to accept, is that our child will have to suffer a consequence. But we know, even biblically speaking, that it is through the tough times that we grow.
That's it.
And learning to accept a mistake, hold yourself accountable, be responsible for something. If that doesn't start at a young age, it won't come.
No.
So we want to help them through that process. And that's not, the other day my son had to give some consequences to one of his. He said it was just agonizing. He was in his room, really upset, and it was all my son could do to not go in there and take care of him. Well, after about 30 minutes, this particular child came out and said, I'm sorry, Dad, I did do that the wrong way. And see, just holding out, don't giving in, letting them have to process and deal with it is how we're going to see some growth in our children.
And then they won't hopefully they won't have to learn bigger lessons the harder way. If they begin with small things.
And we talked last week about those life lessons learned by doing homework. Because school in itself does teach life lessons.
Definitely.
I mean, how to read and comprehend information, how to communicate ideas with others, how to listen, how to take notes, how to decipher what's important. That's a huge thing. I remember when I was teaching school that was the hardest thing to teach kids, how to read something and say, what's important about this?
Right.
Because that's tough. That's, thinking skills. How to get along with other people. That's a huge thing.
Right.
A big time thing.
Right.
How to come up with a plan.
Hello.
How to solve a problem, how to take action.
Right.
School does all that for your children, which I'm telling you is more important than the academic part of it. All of those things.
So many times that when I went to college, and I did get a double degree, okay? When I went to college, I learned so much more about life than I did about academics.
Absolutely. I say that all the time.
Wow.
Now, one thing that I really love about homework, and coming from the former teacher standpoint, is it teaches kids how to be alone with their thoughts. And in today's world, self-discovery and self-awareness and all that, even though one day we're going to do a lesson on this thought of this narcissistic society, because everybody's
about
self
me.
and Facebook and all that, but it's not about our thoughts.
Exactly. It's not about the real inside me.
Right. That part of us is a dying educational tool.
Right.
Because we have access to so much information, we hardly need to depend on our brains.
Right.
So that's a sad thing. Because we can, and I admit on this show a lot, I am a Google queen.
Oh, no,
I can Google anything.
Yeah.
But homework in this world of competing with this high-tech stuff, just like everything else does, homework is right there in that category of a way for your children to be by themselves and use their brains.
Right.
Like I say, camp is so important
That's
today.
What I was just going to say.
Yeah.
Getting outside and being able to, it's so amazing to consider, I've had this discussion with one especially of my children. And when I say, okay, excuse me, time to turn the technology off. Well, what do you want me to do? Visit, talk.
Think, read. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's such a baffling concept.
I know.
When they get into a pattern. And when you see them, when I see him getting into that pattern is when I have to go, whoa, brakes.
Right.
So
what I'm saying, I think, in these thoughts is we need to, as the adults in our children's life, not be so discouraging about homework as we are sometimes. We're like, oh, no, do you have homework?
Oh, no.
But to be encouraging to them that it's an important part of their education.
Absolutely.
We can't spend valuable FaceTime with our kids telling them how bad their homework is. We have to use that one-on-one, that FaceTime with our kids, telling them how important homework is.
And what that does, secondary to that, is obviously undermining the authority of the school.
Right.
That sends a totally mixed message. If we're wanting them to respect our authority, but we are undermining the authority of the school,
that's right.
That's not a good thing.
And then after we had our big discussion last week, I realized that a question might come up of when we might really feel like there is a need for more motivation or more remediation. And as a former teacher, I realized that kids go through a phase, and all of my kids did it, and my grandkids have to do it, where they just kind of have to be put back on track.
Right. Oh,
you just kind of have to say, okay, wait a minute. You've been doing great. This is not you. You're sliding. That's
it.
And if you don't, here's some consequences. But generally, if you have a child with a true learning difficulty or learning differences, I would say when I was teaching, that's going to exhibit themselves fairly early on in school, at least by the third grade. They're going to start having a difficulty in all areas, problem solving, understanding directions, organizing their ideas. They'll have difficulty comprehending what they're reading. So you will start to see those things. It will not just be one thing or one area. Right. So you can also look at standardized test scores and see if there's some inconsistencies between their test scores and their grades they're getting. And I always say that there isn't a second grader alive who doesn't want to make good grades. So if you have one that young that's really struggling, then obviously you need to go on for further testing and see.
Right.
But then we've got to realize that today in American society, people are not happy with an average child, and you may just have a child who's average, and we don't want our kids to be average. But if that's where they are, then that's where they are. I remember having a parent-teacher conference with a mom, and I was telling her that her child would not achieve at the level that her mom thought that she would, and she had the most precious reply. She said, well, I just have to change my expectations. And I just love that.
Yes, that would be a loving response.
That's right.
That would be a response of a mother's love that is concerned for her child's best interest.
That's right.
Because I have heard moms push and push and push and say, you have to do the most. You have to be the best.
Right.
Literally those words. And the child
or they'll criticize the teacher or the counselor.
Definitely.
Well, she did not argue that I didn't know what I was talking about.
Right.
She was just very supportive that she's just going to love her daughter right where she is.
Exactly.
And so the question is, can I apply that ABC principle to kids who have a diagnosed learning difference? And I say yes, that you can and you should, because kids with learning differences still need to learn to work on their own. They need you to back off to a degree.
You may have to, like she said, adjust your expectations.
Adjust it. Yeah.
Right.
They still need to have time limits. They may need more help than other kids.
And they need the confidence of doing the job well.
And being able to do things on their own, too. But you may have to have a tutor for that child, either during school or after school. And this is all very, very individual.
Very
Every
specific to each
child is different.
Right.
And so, one thing that I learned in education is there's not a test alive that determines how hard a child will work. There's just not.
There's not a test alive anywhere.
Anywhere.
It's not alive.
It's not alive, true. But there isn't a test out there.
Very good.
That would determine how
me.
hard a child would work. Because many children learn to compensate just really nicely when they discover for themselves that an area is hard for them. So they figure that out.
And it's good for their self-respect to see that, okay, I'm good at this and I have a challenge at this. Okay, I'm going to work at this. And I've watched in my own kids places where they excelled and places where they worked harder to excel.
And some kids are going to shut down when it gets hard, and some kids are just going to dig their heels in deeper, and that's what we talked about on our show, different personalities.
But if we cheer for them digging their heels in deeper, that's going to make them more apt to want to pursue that. If we support them struggling and then step in to do it, that tells them you are not smart enough to do this.
Right.
You cannot do this. So that's going to go across the board. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah.
That's going to go across the board in their ability to believe that they can make a good choice.
So certainly if you truly believe that and parents, you guys know your kids better than anybody, better than the teacher, better than anybody. If you've got that little thing in your spirit that says that something is just not right as this child is learning, perhaps you've got other children and you've got one that's not doing the same thing, certainly get an evaluation by someone who is a professional in that area, because the earlier you detect something like that, the better.
Right.
Absolutely the better.
And it's so important. It's so important for them. I have one that definitely learns differently than the other three. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to tell you what, he learned to overcompensate all of that and was National Honor Society. And
that's right.
Has worked hard, but he does have to work a good bit harder.
And he may go about it a different way.
He does, a totally different way. But encouraging them to do that and supporting them when they do it. And I think the biggest thing in this is adjusting your expectations.
That's right.
And making them feel good about it, not a failure or less than.
So sometimes it's really necessary for us to get more involved with our child's homework than we would typically do. Perhaps they've been sick. If you've got the flu, you're out a week. So parents do have to step in and help them. And perhaps we don't understand their assignment, but we do the best we can as parents, trying to get our kids to get on task and get all that work done. It's very hard and difficult when you have a child that's been sick for a week or more to get involved. But here are some important do's and don'ts to remember. Number one, don't give the child an easy way out. This will not help anybody. When a child complains that he cannot do the work, tell him or her, simply tell them this: well, then it's time for you to ask your teacher for extra help.
Right.
And sometimes, one of my children was the worst about this.
Oh, definitely.
About maybe saying that they would complain so much, this particular child of mine, I'm not going to say names, that I would say, you make this a bigger deal than it really is by just complaining about it.
Right.
Just walk in there and get it done.
Right.
So then a child, might say, I can't. And this means, what it really means is, will you do this for me?
No.
So resist that urge to
Hello.
make your life easier. I mean, you might even think, okay, this is going to make my life easier if I just go ahead and tell him.
It's just like when we're training our kids to do a cleaning job.
Right.
We start it and then they're taking a long time. So then we go, oh, forget it. I'll do it myself.
Right.
That does not help them.
No, it doesn't.
help them in
No.
their home or in their skills, their living skills. It doesn't help them in their homework skills. It does not
It
help.
may make life easier right at that moment, but
For you.
you just have to resist that urge.
Yeah,
you
'cause
have to say, I'm not going to do this for you. I'm going to insist you do it by yourself.
Right. 'Cause
And
in the
this
long run,
is-
it's not going to be easier for you.
No.
Or them.
And sometimes in a child's case, it isn't a matter of not understanding. It's a matter of not wanting to do it because it's too long or it's too time consuming. So when they say, I can't, you just look at them and say, but I won't.
That's right.
And you will.
That's right.
So that's what we have to do.
That's right. And then don't go back to school for your child. Don't try to be the hero and Google how to solve an algebraic problem. Again, you know what? This is the time to either let them Google it.
Yeah, show them how to do that.
Right. Google it. Or, I have found another tool is YouTube.
Right.
They'll do math problems on YouTube as well. Or go to school early. Let them go to school early and ask the teacher, ask for extra help, or have them call one of their classmates.
Yeah.
But leave it in their lap to troubleshoot through the problems because they're
Right.
going to have to learn to do that as a life skill.
That's right.
When you come up against a challenge, learn to troubleshoot through the possibilities.
And sometimes this is a challenge for me as a former teacher because
Right.
I love that challenge of that algebra
Right.
problem or that geometry
Right,
problem.
right.
Love it. And so I
and
have
sometimes
to.
we want a little extra kudos from our
Oh
kids.
yeah, I just kind of love that. So what I have learned to do, what I do if I see if they come to me with a problem, I write it down and work it on a separate sheet of paper because I love that challenge. I love math, but I say, okay, you solve it, and then let's see which one of us gets it right, and then it kind of becomes a little game,
Yeah,
a little challenge
yeah.
for them. And above all, don't let homework become an emotional battle.
Right.
All of us have helped our kids do some assignment, and then we get this response. That's not the way my teacher does it. Oh, and then it's just like, okay, then we feel like we have to dig in our heels and say, well, that's the way I learned it. Or I'm not.
Well, that's the way this teacher's doing it.
Yeah. And or we might say, well, I'm sure it is because this is the way it's done.
But the best response?
The best response would be, then maybe I'm not the one to help you. So ask your
Right.
teacher tomorrow.
That removes the emotion from
Yeah.
the
And
whole
very
thing.
quickly, they will decide they might want to listen to you.
Right.
But,
Right.
if you just say, well, I'm not the one to help you, and you just turn out and say, tomorrow your teacher can help you, and you walk out the room, and quickly they're going to say, well, no, maybe, let me look at it. Let me try this again. They start stumbling over
They
it.
start doing a little fishtailing.
Right. And so it's one thing that's so important in our parenting, just in general, we have to realize our goal is not to make our kids happy.
It cannot be that. Even though
Cannot.
that is such a temptation.
Right.
Because we love those little people. And
That's
those little
right.
people that turn into big people. We just love them and we know they're working so
right.
hard and their schedules are crazy. And we can think of a million reasons why, but I'm going to tell you what, doesn't work for them.
No.
It's not the best thing for
And there
'em.
are things we can do that bring them happiness, like we
Right.
take them to Six Flags, we stop for ice cream. We can bring happiness to them and a smile on their faces, but that can't be our goal in life.
No.
You know?
No, because we take the training tools that God has put in their lives to strengthen them and equip them. We remove them, and they will not
Right.
grow and learn and be what they need to be because we are the ones undermining their growth.
And actually, one of the best things we can do in life is to make our child unhappy and uncomfortable sometimes.
Well, so
and that
makes them-
sounds sad, but that
it's
is true.
You know, the best analogy that I know that has been very poignant for my children from the time they were little is the egg, the chick that is trying to be hatched, that's trying to get out of
Right.
the eggshell. And research has proven that if that chick receives help, the chick will die.
Wow, that's
will not
great
have,
analogy. I
will
love
not
it.
have the
Yeah.
strength, won't.
Love
but
it.
if they fight their way out,
Right.
they can do it. And I mean, literally, any little amount of help undermines their life.
And I can see that now in my head as I'm
Yes.
thinking about that little chick. That's how he gets stronger.
That's right.
Because he's using his muscles
the
to
whole point.
peck their way out.
Right.
Great. And John Roseman says it like this: if you paddle someone's canoe long enough, they will never learn to paddle it themselves. They also become convinced that only you are capable of paddling
That's
it.
what I was talking about, undermining
Yes.
their ability to believe in themselves.
Right.
That's
Right.
it. That's huge.
And, there's this other area where consistency, we talk about consistency
All the
on
time.
our show a lot because it's hugely important in our parenting skill set. So if you set your bedtime at 8 o'clock and at 7:55 your child says he didn't do the homework, then that sometimes that's where you have to make a child unhappy for growth to appear.
Right.
Because if you say, okay, go ahead and get your homework, what you're saying is my rules really don't matter.
Right.
And look, we're not saying don't ever do that on an occasion. If
Right.
in
There's a
180
special
days of
project
school,
and-
your child has never messed up one time, okay, then you can do that. But if it becomes, you see this pattern, this child is not doing it, and it can start really innocently. I mean,
I'm telling you, if you have strong
innocently.
personalities in your home and you make an exception, it becomes 10 times the freedom to them.
What happens is you've been tricked into changing
Yeah, you
your
give an inch, they take a
rules
mile.
to accommodate their behavior.
Right.
And I can remember many
Dangerous.
times as a parent that I had
Oh.
to wake myself up and say, whoa, what have I done here?
That's right.
It's my little people have,
Right. That's the whole
have
thing.
tricked me. All right. That's our show for the day. We hope there's something that's been of value to you. Again, go to our website. It's amomthing.com or .org, and you'll see the latest blog on homework. It has some of these principles to it. You'll find a new recipe up there and some old recipes. If you've never been there, will be new to you.
Yes.
So look that up. Remember that consistency is hugely important. And we always say when we wrap up our show, number one, don't give up. God's given you this a very important job, and thank Him that you're the mom of your family.
Absolutely. We want you guys to be inspired and blessed, encouraged. And so we want you to speak life into your children's hearts every day. We just want to encourage you to do that. Use words that build them up and bring them closer to God.
And here's that consistency thing.
Uh-huh.
Kids thrive on consistency in every area of their life.
But consistency does not have to mean boring. So have fun with your kids and have a blessed week.
We'll see you next Monday.